I was involved in a really significant aircraft mishap with some folks that we both know, and that began a whole new level of lessons that I had to learn and that I had to fight through to continue to be uh, in the circle that I wanted to be in.
And if it's okay with you, I want to talk a little bit more about some of that.
Sure.
So SUMO 4-3.
SUMO 4-3.
You're on a CSAR mission. You're on the CSAR bird with your team, and then flew out to sit alert and flying back from alert. Helicopter had a catastrophic loss of power in a snowstorm. Fell out of the sky and crashed. It was an MH-47. Normally about 35 feet tall. Impacted the terrain so hard that it was just about 4 or 5 feet tall across the thing.
It's pretty flat, yeah.
So you're right in the back of this. Scott Duffman's on ICS. Walk me through what happened in the incident.
Yeah, so we like you were saying, we forward staged to wait for a mission opportunity, and because of weather, because of whatever factors that were all contributing, it was kind of one of those things where like, hey man, let's fold up the tents, go back and wait for this to be more opportunistic. And so we packed everything up, jumped in the Chinook, and took off just after dark, which was common for the units that we worked with. And we flew directly into a pretty significant storm front, and we just kind of got in the back. There was no flight following or anything like that. It was just like, hey man, we're just on a bus going home. So I sat down next to my team leader, Scott Duffman, and the other PJ, Danny, and our controller that was sitting across from us, Timmy. And we just went to sleep, man. And there was, I'd say 30, 45 minutes into the flight, there was a commotion in the aircraft. Everybody just kind of sat up and looking around. And when you're in that environment and you're used to being in that environment, you just see the green from the night vision, and that's all you see. And you're just looking around. Is everybody okay? What's going on? One of the rear crew chiefs ran up to the front of the aircraft, and you didn't normally see that.
Ever, right?
No, it was so you're like, yeah. Ooh, okay. So hair starts standing up, and I switched my inbitter, my inner team radio from inner team, so I could talk to the boys, to inner plane, so I could hear what the helicopter was saying. And I heard one of the pilots say, "Yeah, we lost number one. No, we lost number two." And then he said, "Okay, yeah, I got nothing. Okay, yeah, let's see what we can do about it." And I'm like, well, I don't want to hear that shit. So I switched it back to inner team, so that for whatever was coming, I was able to talk to the not only the CSAR team, but the Rangers that we were with. And I looked forward, and that fella came running back, and Scott kind of got up on one knee and just kind of stopped and was like, "What's going on?" And he said, "Sit down and hang on." And Scott sit down, he leaned over to me. I just saw the green of his night vision. He said, "Hang on." And I distinctly remember the smile, and he sat down and kind of got comfortable, and I leaned over to Dan Houghton, the fellow that was with me, and I put my arm around him, and when I went like this, he moved and he looked at me, and I just leaned forward to him and I said, "Hang on." And we woke up on the ground. I don't recall an impact. I don't recall anything horribly catastrophic except for what I saw when I was able to kind of get my wits about me and take a look around. Nobody was really, there was no verbal, "I'm in pain," anything like that. There was a mess though. I mean, you talk about a helicopter that normally you can stand straight up in, and then I literally have the roof of the helicopter right here on me with my right arm trapped, and I had a mid-shaft humeral fracture here. My elbow here was completely shattered, and it was trapped in the wreckage. And I don't remember pain. I don't remember cold. This is February in Afghanistan, February 17th. And I don't remember really a sense of urgency. It was just like, oh, well, let's just deal with what's going on, right? And when I moved my hand like this, I could put it on Scott. However, we were laying in the wreckage itself, and when I turned my head like this, I could see him. It's hard to replicate because my arm's normal now and it doesn't bend all the way back and touch the middle of my spine, but it was really clear that Scott had been killed on impact, and Danny was also he was in pretty rough shape, and I went right to my thing. I started doing an assessment. He's breathing, I can hear him, and I started moving my hand up and down his leg, and when I got to his femur, it felt big, like swollen, compartment syndrome from a fracture. And when I put my hand on that femur, my only good hand, is this one was still trapped, I get the squeeze, and he's like, "Don't do that." So I was like, okay, he's talking to me, he's okay. A lot of chaos, a lot of different things going through your mind. Where are we? I can't move. There's a handful of people that were doing what they're supposed to be doing. Everybody just kind of did that default to action that is really wired into our heads in that sense.
That's not normal, by the way.
Normal for us.
Right.
Yeah. So that's yeah. So for us, it's like, hey,
because you haven't talked about doing an assessment on yourself, right? You immediately go and start checking out your teammates first.
Right. No, that's a very good point, But yeah, I just went to that action.
Right.
I mean, what can I do? What can I do to fix whatever? That's a pretty big problem, right? So I had formulated like a timeline of how this sequence of events happened over the course of pre-incident, post-incident, medevac, all this business, and it was really askew. But where we had been forward staged previous to this mishap, the PJ team was an Air Force Reserve team. It was like kind of a crew comprised of a few of the teams. We had met with them the night before because, again, we're a small career field. We know everybody. So we just went up and say, what's up to the guys that we knew? And the next thing I know, I have one of these guys just kind of like peeking through the hole in the side of the helicopter. And as soon as I saw the PJs, I said, well, we're going to be okay. And they started to do their thing, pulling everybody out, doing that rapid trauma assessment that PJs are really good at, doing the mass casualty triage, getting us where we needed to be, and prioritizing us for the medevac. Now, the SUMO 4-3 was one of a three flight. It was 4-1, 4-2, and 4-3. 4-1 had landed back at Bagram, and they had kind of pieced together the events and not really sure what happened. And when it was very clear that there was a mishap and there was casualties, the medic from that particular bird threw a bunch of fellas together, and they flew back out. They aided in the recovery mission that the Air Force, the ACC, the rescue PJs had came in to take care of, right?
So the task force we were working with, you were the rescue platform.
Yes.
And so when it came down to down helicopter, our first response would be normally to reach out to your team and your crew and send them after you. But all of a sudden we're in this situation, and so you guys go down. It's chaos erupts as we try and sort through. First reports come in. It's very spotty. We didn't have direct communication. From the task force all the way to the helicopter. The other helicopters and the crew weren't really sure or in the flight weren't really sure what happened because you're all in the middle of a snowstorm flying through with zero visibility, and the situation unfolds, kind of terrifyingly in slow motion as we're trying to figure out what happened to this other helicopter. And then, so we're reaching across to other organizations. We reached out to the Air Force. We got them to send their PJs out. They end up showing up on site first and actually using your equipment from your team to start to extract people out of the helicopter. And so this takes about an hour. It takes about an hour, and you're on the ground by yourself in Afghanistan. What was that like? What was that hour like?
It wasn't. At that point, it wasn't unfamiliar for me to be outside the wire, so to speak, like off a base in a remote area. But this was definitely unique, given the status that we were all laying there in. There were a few of the Army Rangers that were able to move. They were walking around and helping with things, and that was, to me, today that's still amazing that they just, again, they did that default to action thing and just started doing things, walking around, kicking little fires out, moving people, helping, getting stuff ready for the rescue and recovery efforts to come in. All after everything was done, I think we were on the ground for about 6 or 7 hours. Now, again, I say I don't remember being cold. I don't really remember any pain. It's just amazing how your body will compensate for something like that and allow you to do things that are sometimes necessary. Looking back on it, to me, I tell the story and people are like, that's one of the most amazing things I've ever heard. But it just needed to be done. You know, I didn't do much that day aside from survive. You know, I was able to kind of tell when the other PJs showed up, kind of give them an initial assessment of what I thought was happening with a few of the patients, and they're like, "T.O., we got it, man. Just here," and fentanyl pop in my mouth and kind of snowed me to make me feel a little better, even though it wasn't really obvious to me how injured I was. Right. You know, so they...
And I appreciate your humble assessment of the situation, but so if I can recap, you're in a crash. The first thing you do when you wake up is tend to all your teammates around you with no care for yourself. You spend the whole hour there leading the Rangers, telling them what to do, getting everybody moving in the same direction, treating everybody around you and everybody that you can reach with the stuff you have within reach. Then when their PJs come in, when the rescue team arrives, you have a handoff ready for them and you tell them the medical condition of everyone in your span of control.
Well, it wasn't the best handoff I'd ever given, but
well, you were in duress, right?
Yes, I tried to maintain to a standard at that time.
If you're enjoying this video, I want to take a second to talk about EliteU.com, where you'll be able to find early access to all of our YouTube content, as well as exclusive interviews and access to mentors. And now back to the video.
And this is all extraordinary, but it's not even the most extraordinary part of the story to me. Because after you've done all this, PJs package you up. You go back through the CASEVAC system that you've sent so many people to before. And now you're going back through it, and you arrive, I think, at Bethesda, right?
We went to
through Germany.
Yeah, we went to a FOB where they stabilized us, and they flew us to Landstuhl. From there, we went to Walter Reed.
Was it Walter Reed? Okay.
Yes, and we were there.
Then you got a whole other fight starting.
Right. Yeah, there was a lot of orthopedic type things. I had a lacerated spleen. Basically, that just kind of fills your entire trunk, torso with a lot of nastiness. So they had to open me up. Clean me up a little bit. I from the impact, this helicopter that can carry like 50 people, if you're not familiar with the size of an MH-47, hit the ground at about 25 Gs, 25 times the force of gravity. And I had both of my lungs were collapsed. So both of the other Air Force fellas that I really close followed their rehab close. We were in the same hospital within a couple of rooms of each other. It was kind of like one of those things. It was like, I got 2 chest tubes. Well, Danny got 3, you know. Oh, wow. So it was kind of like one of those, how is that a competition at that point, right? But yeah, it's like, oh yeah, he has 3, I only have 2. Okay, well, all right. But yeah, to be on I like to say that I did everything that I wanted to do while I was an active duty PJ. To be on the giving and receiving end of the skills that we bring to the table is a pretty unique situation. I think it's pretty cool.
Do you have some critiques for the PJs afterwards?
No, not really. And I talked earlier about the sequence of events that I followed, and it wasn't until 2 years and some change later that I ran into one of the initial guys that kind of led the triage. A good friend of mine, Tim Lum, he looked at the paper and he was just kind of like, everything here happened, but can I kind of put it in order for you? Mm-hmm. And it was just amazing, whether it was due to the lapse in consciousness or just the fog of everything that was going around. He was able to put it in a chronological order where wow, okay, this really makes sense now,
right?
You know, but yeah, just for them to be there and be able to do what they do so well it's really amazing to see when I recollect and I watch it, because you know when you're running a mass casualty situation and you kind of have your heads down, taking care of everything, you don't really get a chance to step back and look at everything that's going on. Mm-hmm. And me laying there in a Skedco, a plastic stretcher, all stabilized with a broken arm slung across my chest, and I'm able to watch everything that's going on. It was strangely motivating.
Yeah.
And in my head, I'm thinking, okay, well, what's going to happen tomorrow? What's going to happen in a week? How am I going to prepare myself to come back from this? I honestly thought that. I was in the hospital ready to just, do I need to go home? They're like, oh yeah, you're going home. And I said, okay, well, and it was more that I was maybe slightly perturbed that somebody was going to have to pick up my slack, in such a way, and that, that's, I can't put it in any other words. I didn't want somebody else to have to do what I was tasked with.
Yeah.
So
at some point they tell you that when you go into Walter Reed, there's a clock that starts if you ever want to be a PJ again. Right. So there's a countdown to get back on status, or you had to separate. So how did that conversation go?
So that was really the kind of like the starting gun, I guess is the best way to put it. Because after all my orthopedic surgery was done, they hammered me back together, put a bunch of titanium in my right arm, and I was waiting for the little Plurivac vacuum thing to reinflate my lungs so that I was healthy enough to breathe without these plastic tubes sticking out of my ribs. So the incident, the actual mishap was February 17th. I was well enough to be driven home from Walter Reed back to here in North Carolina on March 9th. That was a Friday. Saturday, Sunday went by, and on that Monday the 12th, I went back into the unit and was standing there at muster. And they just, they were kind of like, hey, Trisko's back, those little claps. And I was like, okay, well, just kind of made it, and just seeing the faces of everybody there, that was again, motivating, inspiring,
Right.
to see the team, to see everybody that was like, hey, welcome back. Let's get you back. Let's get you back in the fight, and
I remember a roaring standing ovation, not a couple little claps, but we were very excited to see you.
It was really, really good to be back and know that I was still a part of that circle, right? So I did some physical rehabilitation there in North Carolina. At a later date, they moved me to Virginia Beach for a little more better care. I'll just say that. At the time, we talked earlier about the resources that we had available, and it was still kind of in its infancy. It was there, but it wasn't really widespread across everybody that had access to it. So,
but you had your leadership looking out for you, looking for the best possible place to get your rehab.
Yeah, and they found it, and they sent me to a naval facility where I did 6 months of rehab there. Came back and was able to do a lot of rehabilitation on my own.
Yeah.
I was fortunate to live real close to another rehab facility that I went to twice a day. And through the, just little positive things, through the temporary use, I had a radial nerve palsy, so I wasn't able to do any flexion or extension of my hand. There's still a minor deficit, ranges of motion in this kind of business, but it wasn't anything that was going to stop me from doing what I wanted to do. I kept doing that, kept doing the rehab stuff. I learned how to shoot left-handed. I mean, it was so in that period of time where I lost the use of my right arm, I became moderately ambidextrous. I guess that was a positive upside of that.
Yeah.
But it was exactly 1 year that I was able to do my first military freefall jump back on status. It was March 12th. I checked back into the unit. Hey, I'm back. And it was 1 year. And they took me out of the back of an aircraft on status, and that was it. I was back up. I was in the fight. They did a.
That's by regulation. We have a year to get you back on rehabilitated, or we have to medical retire you, right? So you have to, after an injury or accident or something like that, by regulation, we have to get you back on status on a year, or start the process to medically retire you, which you had every right to, right? You had every right to be medically retired. But you chose not to. You chose to fight your way back on status. You chose to fight your way through all of the waivers, through all the rehab and everything, when you could have by all means just taken your paycheck and medically retired. Why?
The teammates, the team I had to my left and my right, that was it.
Yeah.
I wanted to get back out there with them, and I did.
Yeah.
You know, that was the best feeling in the world. Mm-hmm.